Whoa, 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 oh, feel the thunder, but there's something sweet about the rain. We're going under.
And the green flag drops and we are underway. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, boys and girls, and welcome to the dunes north of Zandvoort in the Netherlands. We're at the Zandvoort Grand Prix circuit for round number 5 here in the Positive Perception GT Championship. Good evening to all of you from watching wherever you may be on this lovely Thursday evening. I am sat in a loft and it is rather warm because the sun's been on it all day. My name is David Russell. I'm delighted as always to be joined by none other than Mr. Chris Honourable. Chris, good evening to you, sir. Is it warm where you are over the other side of the pond?
It is. It's inconsistent would be the best way to talk about the temperature in Ohio at the moment, but today, beautiful, sunny, about 75 degrees, so beautiful out.
Nice.
Hopefully I'll get out there after this broadcast here.
This is true, yeah. So I'm coming towards the end of my day. Your day's, I wouldn't say it's just starting. You're about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, are you? Am I right?
Yeah. 2 o'clock here. We're about 5 hours behind you guys, depending on what's going on with daylight savings time. And still have plenty of sunlight, so I'm going to get out there and throw some discs at some baskets and some disc golf.
Nice. That sounds like a lovely plan. I'm very jealous because it's going to be dark by the time we're finished here tonight for me. But hopefully that means it cools down a bit as well, because I've no idea what 75 is, but it's about 20 here and it's about 30 in this room because it's got no form of heat removal, which is less than ideal. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather, are we? We're here to talk about the racing. And like I said before, Zandvoort is our destination for, as we've just been joking around, the penultimate round of the season. One more after this one at Watkins Glen. 60-minute race tonight, Chris. Pit window for with a stop for tyres and fuel. So strategy going to be a key one. Not the busiest on track we can see at the moment. The drivers are just in the pre-race briefing, so we'll get on to qualifying once they're out and ready to go. But it doesn't necessarily make a huge amount of difference, is it? Because Zandvoort, of course, well known for being quite a tight and twisty circuit. So we're probably still going to see a lot of action on track, you'd like to think.
Yeah, this track is going to produce a lot of close racing just because of its twisty turniness, and also it's not really wide in comparison to some of the other places we've been, so passing is going to be difficult, and people are going to be just on the bumper of the person in front of them waiting for that mistake, which we've seen a couple of mistakes in the typical corners here during the practice and warm-up sessions that we've kind of been spying on. So it's going to be an interesting race. We only have 18 drivers on the track today, so it's almost a full F1 grid. I'll take your quote from before the broadcast there. But I think that's not going to be a problem here. With the way that the races have gone the past couple of weeks, where, we've had some incidents and we've had some iffy decisions during driving, so this might actually make for better racing today. We'll see.
Yeah, we will indeed. Not too long until we get underway. Of course, 20-minute qualifying to set the grid as per usual. Still a little bit of time for a few people to get more than an F1 start grid, which would be nice. But like you say, plenty of action, I'm sure, nonetheless. Now, before we get into things, let's take you back through the standings after the final round, or the last round is in the books. The last round at Misano, Chris, as you mentioned, was quite a messy one, is probably the right way to put it, isn't it? I think there was some words uttered, some wrists slapped, and some harsh words and penalties being issued. So you never know. People could be smarting from that a little bit as well. Maybe some egos have been bruised. But like I say, hopefully we won't see any more of that this evening. Let's talk you through the AM standings. So Rob Besant still miles ahead at the top of this one. He, importantly, is still yet to change his car, if I'm not mistaken. he's still in the old Lamborghini, so he's not going to be receiving a 50-point deduction as it stands, which puts him well clear. At the top of the timing, but at the top of the championship, Lisa Louise Keane sits in behind him. She's not available this evening, so she will drop points regardless of what happens to him, and she'll drop points to Nadia Bellozzo, who's further 5 points behind in third position. Sandro Bosch and Michael de Groot are 5 points aside each other in fourth and fifth on 77 and 72, and it's nice and close towards the bottom of the point scorers in the AM category. Colin Dunn, Sebastian Bidnell, and Federico Alberti, 2 points across all three of them, but Colin will be dropping back because he has decided to change into the new Lamborghini, so be interesting to see how he fares in that one. Cast our mind to the silver standings, very, very close at the top end of this one. Very much the championship to keep an eye out for if you're looking for some action and some intrigue throughout these last couple of rounds. Thomas van der Stroys leads the way in that one. He's got a 5-point gap ahead of, Gianluca De Luca with 166 and 161 points respectively. Mark Cooper sits a further 9 points back, with Andrea De Perna a further 7 points back from him in the top 4. And then Alessandro De Candia, if I can see here, is one of the top 2 of the top 5 actually in the server at the moment. So that is Van der Stroys and De Candia. So definitely a chance for those two to make some decent ground and bridge the gap at the top of the standings. Steve Derrick is in there as well. He is 2 points behind Alessandro De Candia, and Mike Richards a further 5 behind him. Himself and Ollie Gill both in the server. James Jackson is not with us this evening at this moment in time, but Peter Phillips is, who rounds out the top 10. And then finally, in the pro standings, Marcus Hagel leads the way. He is not here, though, so we're interested to see whether that will have any play on the championship by the end of this evening. Martin Thorpe is in second place, with Carolus Yargulis sitting at the back end of the top 3 in the pro championship. He, of course, did change his car, so he is technically top of the championship if he didn't do that, which remains to be seen whether that was the right decision or not come the end of the season. Mark Roddenberry and Niall Dodds nice and close to round out the top 5 there, a point between them, but Mark has changed to the new Lamborghini as well. Finally giving up the M6, which I'm sure he's probably quite pleased about, to be fair. Ash Coupland and Carlo Durazio 6th and 7th, Dario Zappa, Gaz Gazulina and Matt Damon round out the top 10. Those last 2 are in the server, and a couple of those in between Chris aren't. So I know we don't typically tend to look at the standings until after everything's kind of kicked off and stewards reports have been done and all that sort of good stuff, but it does mean there's going to be a lot of change going into the final round, which is going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm curious how the points are going to pan out at the end here, especially because, as you mentioned, there was a couple drivers on that list changed cars, people aren't here. It's just going to shake things up a little bit to make it, the last round's just going to matter that much more.
Absolutely. It'll be very interesting to see how it's shaking up ahead of that. Maybe we'll do a bit of social media admin and send out an updated standings before the end of the night. Maybe even I'll work on some permutations. How about that for some content gold? I'll get the abacus out and see if I can figure it out. I probably won't be able to, because for those of you who aren't aware, there is a drop round that drivers can take here. In fact, I think it's a drop race we do. It shows you how much I keep on top of this. I tend to handle the broadcast. I let everyone else deal with the race admin. So if it's a drop race, which I believe it is, then they're only dropping their worst race of the season. Reason being, we've got some rounds, of course, that have 1 race, like we did this evening. We've got some rounds, that have 2, with some that have 3. So feels unfair, doesn't it, Chris, to drop the round where you had 1 race and then the guy who wins the championship doesn't drops the round who has 3, or vice versa.
Right.
Because
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
there's method in the madness, is what I'm trying to say.
So tonight's interesting because it's back to that single race format like you were talking about earlier. I honestly can't tell whether I like the single race format more or the multi-race format more. If the race is close, I think I like single race format just because it keeps the battles going for a longer period of time so that potential mistakes or, just beautiful racecraft can come out. Whereas when it's multi-race, kind of like we had last week, it's almost like, especially with the result we had last week, it's almost like you can full send it out right away in the first race. And you're like, well, I still have another race and that's okay. And especially knowing you also have that drop race. So you can full send it in that first race, kind of take risks that you wouldn't normally take, and then drop that race if you mess something up, and then go back to your normal racing craft for that second race to kind of redeem your night. This one, a little different.
Yeah, it's. I'm personally. I'm going to do the very political answer and say there's benefits to both. I feel. I totally agree with exactly what you said there. I think in this round this evening, especially this one, because we've got the pit window and the pit stops that we need to take into account as well. Strategy is going to be key. So it's very likely that we're not going to know who's going to be kind of at the sharp end of the race. Probably going into maybe like sort of last 15-20 minutes. So it's interesting to note kind of where that's going to play out as well. But like you say, there's also an argument that having two races when things are really close is always good fun as well. Like I'm thinking back to the triple header we had at Brands Hatch last season. I think it was the third round of the series. It was just after Christmas or maybe just before. I can't remember which round it was. And it was nuts. Like, I remember doing it on my own. I think that was the last one I did before you got involved as well. And I remember thinking, I need help because there's so much going on here. I can't keep a track of it, but it was brilliant because everyone just went for it. But there was that kind of level where everyone went for it, but almost in like a concerted manner. Do you know what I mean? Like there was no one was sending it for the sake of sending it. There was loads of moves happening, but no one kind of going beyond that point of kind of fairness. If that makes sense.
You know, that's interesting you mentioned that because one of the more frustrating things about some services like, let's say, iRacing, or maybe even worse, like an ACC or a Gran Turismo, there's almost no... With iRacing, there's some consequences there, but they're minimal. There's almost no consequences in the world of sim racing, so it's almost enticing to be like, just send it. Just send it, and if it doesn't work out, just go to another race. When you're in a league format like this, it makes it so that it's more risky because, you know, you have to... What am I looking for? You have to, like, report to the league owner. You have to be present in the Discord. So there's a little bit more of that personal interaction with the other drivers on the grid. So hopefully tonight we'll see some really beautiful racecraft because instead of us being surprised at how people are taking each other out or just kind of racing questionably, I won't say dirty necessarily, I really want us to be talking about how good the racecraft is for one race. That would be a nice switch up. And I'm sure Mr. Mark Raddenberry, Mr. Prosper Bossman, as we call him, would also appreciate that as well.
May I just add that it's not just we who call him that. He also refers to himself as Prosper Bossman. Frequently talks in the third person on Twitter and refers to himself as Prosper Bossman, which never fails to get a chuckle from me.
You know, I do the same. So when I see him saying Prosper Bossman, I'm like, I know it's you.
Yeah, we all know we're behind the fourth wall or whatever you want to call it that they talk about in those kind of places. But anyway, cars are on track. Speaking of which,
here we go.
Here is Mr. Raddenberry. Of course, we said a minute ago while we were talking through the standings, he is one of the handful of people who've actually elected to move over to the new evolution of the Lamborghini Huracan, which I think looks exactly the same as the old one.
Yeah. Honestly, if you didn't tell me that he switched to the new version, I'd be like, oh, why'd he switch to that old car?
Exactly, yeah. Why would you not keep the BMW? But
yeah, just stay on the Beamer or go to the Porsche.
Exactly. But he has done a good job. I know he's actually been away. So he was down on the south coast of England over the last couple of days, getting a bit of sun and seeing some family and stuff. So welcome back to normality, Mark. Welcome back to the fun of league admin and all that sort of good stuff as well. Assuming you watch back. We're actually going to have a chat with him on the Formation lap as well. He has kindly offered his services to be dragged in and accosted verbally by you and I, Chris, which is always good fun. So make sure you get your questions. If you want to ask Mark a question, if you want us to ask Mark a question, then let us know in the chat. That'd be fun, wouldn't it, if we can get some audience participation in the form of questions. But the reason I was actually going on about this, I will come back to my point, is the fact that I'm pretty sure he's designed this livery this afternoon, which is
nice.
Rather impressive. Him and Colin in contrast delivery, same design, different colour. But yeah, it's nice to see. Still putting the effort in. He could have gone with a standard in-game livery, so it's nice to see he's pulled his finger out a little bit and actually put it together, because I know he's a busy man.
Yeah, you know, there's something about the Lambo, though, because anybody who's ever tried the game of ACC has probably tried the career mode, right? And the first thing you're thrown into is the Lambo where you got to do a couple different things on what track are you on?
It's Monza in the Super Trofeo.
Monza.
I know it well.
Yeah, and that's the worst introduction to a game I've played in a long time, because ACC, the way that it drives is heavier than most other sims, in my opinion. So it just feels like your brake pedal is like on 50% power all the time almost.
Yeah.
So I have this, I guess, little bit of hatred for this car because of that experience, because I went through the tutorial mode, finally got like my wits about me on how ACC drives, and then switched cars immediately, and then was good in other cars. So it like has this PTSD effect on me where I'm like, that car is the worst car in ACC, only because it was the first car I ever drove in ACC.
Ooh. That's arguably one of the worst breaking points I've ever seen in ACC from out there as well. He won't mind me saying.
He's giving us a great demo.
he's explaining why nobody likes the Lamborghini. The one thing I will give for it though, I'm kind of neither here nor there. I think I drove it once in an endurance race and quite enjoyed it, to be fair. Of those two types of cars, by that I mean that and the Audi, I prefer the Audi. I just think it pitches better, it's lighter, it feels more agile. The Lamborghini just looks quite lazy, I feel.
For its really aggressive lines, it doesn't have that sense of speed when you're watching it that some of the other cars do.
It could be Mark, to be fair, but let's not. He knows I'm only joking, but only slightly. Anyway, he's not slowest ever at the moment. Matt Damon is the fastest though, 135.5, 8 tenths of a second quicker, that man, than anyone else. He's now in the affectionately named Damon Stallion car, which is
Damon Stallion. I feel like he missed the boat with the Jason Bourne.
I was just about to say this. Yeah, it's like he's missed a trick completely. But who am I to judge? To be fair, I can kind of get it because he probably gets that so often. It's really quite nice not to go with the flow on that pun. So
when he watches these broadcasts, he's just rolling his eyes like, "Come on, guys."
He'll see his car come up on the screen and think, right, and in 3, 2, 1, right. There's the comment.
That's a timer for how long we mentioned Jason Bourne.
Oh, dear.
I didn't look at the timings on the practice round. Of course, practice is kind of a false sense of security if you're trying to look at those timings. But right now, 1:35.5 seems to be the fastest time. I think we're going to be cutting a lot of seconds off of that, though, as these drivers get a little bit more used to what's going on this track. What do you think?
I think you're right, yes. I mean, Matt Damon was actually improving on his last lap until he made that mistake coming out of Hans Ernst Bock, which is the little chicane on the back straight, I suppose you call it, and then he aborted the lap. Mark Radby's already gone quicker. Jesus Christ, he's gone, he's gone a second and a half quicker than his original lap, so good time from him. We've still got the likes of Carol Gullis and Miles Dixon, of course, to put their competitive lap times in, and Carlo Dorazio, who has appeared as well. He will be getting a slap on the wrist, though, because Naughty Boy joining after qualifying started, so he will be getting a little bit of a ticking off from the admin team, I believe, because for those of you who don't know, when you have a custom livery, it provides a very small and very brief screen freeze when you join a server. So normally that isn't it's frowned upon. It says not allowed, it's frowned upon.
Well, he's the only one in the BMW, so maybe it'll be nice to have one of them on the track, I guess, right?
Yeah, it's very German engineering heavy. In fact, let me rephrase that. Very German or Italian heavy. I think.
Yeah.
In fact, every single car is either. Oh no, there's one that isn't. You got Steve Derrick and the Aston Martin. I was going to say otherwise they're all.
There are the wings.
Yeah, they're all German or Italian manufacturers on the grid tonight. So clearly tells you something. That German reliability doing the business. What we got? We got 1, 2, 3. Nearly forgot the Mercedes 4, 5, 6 German cars. Then 1, 2, 3.
We're gonna have to ring up Eris and just casually ask him his list of like top 5 cars and see if that jives with like the most powerful cars in ACC.
100%. 12 Italians on the grid, which is tells you all you need to know. But yeah, going back to what you said originally, I do think times will go. They will go quicker. Like I say, Matt Damon was going quicker. We've still, like I say, we've still got Yogulis and Dixon to put lap times in entirely. So they're
closing in on each other a little bit. You can see the grid shuffling a little each time someone crosses the finish line. So if it goes like it has the last couple of weeks, it's gonna be close. What were we? The top 15 or something was within a second of each other for the last couple races. It's been very close.
It definitely has, and we can see now we do officially have an F1 size grid because Andrea Perna has joined us as well. He'll be in the pit lane, but he will have more than enough time to put a lap time in, as will this man on your screen, Carlos Yogulis, the Pulse Sim Sport Porsche 911 GT3 2. I think it's that way around. Can't remember. New car, whatever we're going to call it. It does look good in that Pulse Sim Sport livery, doesn't it?
It does look very, very good, and there happens to be a jerk in my town that has the car in this nice pitch black color. It's just a beautiful car, and we pulled up beside him on a stoplight one day, and I'm just staring at the car, and then you know when you're staring at someone's car or whatever it may be, and then you like look at the person and they're just like staring at you, watching you watch their stuff, and you're like, oh, my bad.
And they're absolutely loving it as well, aren't they?
Yeah, because he's like, this is why I bought the car. He's just like watching me Google what, just admire the car. And my wife's like, you want that car? I'm like, yeah, just a little bit. You think?
You're there with dribble coming down the side of your face like a Homer Simpson donut sort of scenario. Oh.
Seriously, it's a very, very pretty car, and this livery actually does it quite a bit of justice. I like bright, colorful liveries like this, rather than being kind of muted. Obviously, in the real world, you kind of need a muted color just so that the cops don't spot you from a mile and a half away. But yeah, this car looks really good.
There's definitely some collateral in thinking that if you do have a brighter car, then the police will come and find you, and almost out of spite will sort of come and say something to you, pull you over, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking, God just seems like a bit of a dick.
He must be going fast. His car's bright color.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like when I don't know how much you get this over in the States, but it's like when you go into like a supermarket car park and you've got a load of youths with very large exhausts on the back of their hatchbacks, and they're driving around and revving the hell out of their engines. Like, it feels like a similar sort of vibe, but just for someone who's got a load of money.
That's not as common as it used to be when I was in high school, because when I was in high school, it was like right when Fast and the Furious started to... Actually, no. It was right after high school when Fast and the Furious was like the movie, like the original one. And that was very, very common all over the place, is just having that Honda Civic that all they did is replace the exhaust to make it noisy. Not any faster.
Oh, it kills
nowadays, though, it's... it's America, so we're SUVs and trucks,
Yeah. Big hurly-burly machines.
Yeah, the trucks, though, they rev around, and, they got the diesel exhaust and everything. So we've replaced the old Japanese import with the high-pitched, whiny exhaust with the giant diesel-powered, low, throaty exhaust in the parking lots nowadays.
Sounds like a very grumpy old man.
I know, these damn guys with their trucks.
Oh dear. I would make a similar comment if it wasn't going to come across as the worst possible thing a human being could ever say. So I'm going to very, very sensibly decline to comment on that. But that was a very good impression. I very much enjoyed that.
We're still pretty tight up in the top, but we're not as tight as we were in the last couple of races. The interesting thing is we kind of predicted that this track was going to be a little bit of a challenge for these drivers. With 20 on Zando, I'm a little worried that the field is going to stretch a little bit for this 60-minute, so keep your rain button handy for when we need it, please.
I did send you as I said, we were saying before, weren't we? I sent you the Mark Raddenbury server panel tablet that he has next to his rig at the moment, which has a restart and red flag button.
He just needs a rain button just to add some fun.
I don't know what the difference is between, because obviously there's only so much you can do on this server. Like, I don't know what the difference is between restart and red flag. Don't know whether that sends something or what it might be. I've got no idea, but very interested to see.
Just
Well, hopefully
no
he doesn't have to use it.
notification whatsoever. Just everyone reappears on the grid. Just
I'm guessing one of them pushes a chat message that says server restart, or maybe vice versa. Sorry, maybe it's got the button that says red flag says in chat red flag, and then the restart button restarts the server. I'm not sure, but
you know, on Jurgelis's Porsche here, I'm noticing a lot of these corners are ending with a little bit of fishtailing on here.
oh yeah,
It
I
looks like
noticed
that back end is a little lively on this track right now. It's
I saw
definitely
that as
seems
well.
to be giving him a struggle.
I did notice that. I noticed it going through Master's Box, the the right-hander, sorry, at the back end, at the top end of the track. So just, hold on, I'm going to try and find, Mark Raddenberry's the closest man to him. So this next corner here, that's the one I first noticed it on, where he did big time kind of slide the back end out, which is good to watch.
Yeah, it's it makes sense on that area because obviously you come over that rise right there, and you're turning while you're hopping over the hill, so it makes sense. But it's definitely a couple different spots look to be giving that Porsche a little bit of kickback, but no problem for Jurgelis whatsoever. He's fastest man on the grid right now, so maybe there's something to be said about letting that tail end be a little loose on Zando.
I was going to say, it's clearly working, isn't it? So we'll have to wait and see. We've still got, 6 minutes left, so still plenty of time for Messrs Damon and Dixon to get in on the act and potentially spoil the party for Mr. Jurgelis. Good evening to Mr. Ash Coupland in the chat. I believe he is on his jollies somewhere in the Spanish Isles at this moment in time. So good evening to you, sir. Thank you for stopping by. Hopefully you don't get a telling off from the missus for for being on your phone and watching the stream whilst you're meant to be enjoying your holiday. So that wouldn't be great if you did. But thank you for tuning in no matter what. As I said, I don't know if you were here when you heard it, but we are interviewing Mr. Raddenberry on the formation lap. So if you've got any questions for him, please pop them in the chat. And as long as they are sensible, knowing what you're like, and as long as they're sensible, we will ask them to him if we get the chance to.
Interesting. This Ferrari seems... I don't know if it's just an optical illusion, but it felt like that segment he just went through was very slow. It didn't feel like it was very rapid at all.
The Ferrari looks a little bit late. I mean, to be fair, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just because Zandvoort is just generally quite a tight track. You expect them to throw it around a little bit, but it feels like cars just feel a little bit lazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wonder, there is something to be said about the fact that Zando is a little bit thinner than some of the other tracks that we're on, so you don't have really a lot of space to play with.
Yeah.
And, like these corners here, obviously, you hit the grass, the curbs are kind of steep, like almost optical illusion steep on a lot of these corners. So you also can't eat a lot of curb for the most part, so you're primarily using the road, which is thin. So maybe that gives it the illusion that it's a little bit slower just because people have to be a little bit more careful on eating curb and stretching those track limits, because there's really no areas other than just grass for you to put your wheels on.
It's very much an old school track, isn't it? If you get it wrong, you are in a wall or in the gravel, which is what I like from a circuit. Let's keep an eye on Miles Dixon, because he is a tenth and a bit off now. I'm noticing that Matt Damon is 0.008 of a second off pole at the moment, which is very intriguing indeed. But Miles Dixon is improving. He's improving by enough to get himself pole as it stands. We'll just have to wait and see as he comes through the final couple of corners whether he can retain that or not. Ivo van Collenberg, the man in 4th place, is improving as well, but he's not improving by enough to get himself really kind of up onto the outer reaches of the top 3. But as he comes through the final corner onto the start finish straight, he's going to cross the line. Pole position as it stands for Miles Dixon, 135.230. So that top 3, because if everyone else wants to just kind of spread out at the back and we get a battle between these 3 for the win, I'm going to be quite happy with 60 minutes of that, to be fair.
Yeah, so that's another strategy when it comes to a 60-minute race is pole position. While it's always important, right? You always want to be out front, but with the amount of time that you have in a 60-minute race, there's a lot of mistakes that can happen. So as long as I'd say you're in the top like 8, I think you got a shot. I really do. And what do we got? Top 8 right now, about 1.5 seconds is the gap. That's totally doable in race pace.
Absolutely. It's it's something, and especially around this tight circuit, we talked about it already. There's the opportunity for mistakes and incidents and stuff like this. It does mean that a clean race is almost as important, if not more important, than being quick around here for the majority. Like, if you can keep it clean, there's a really good chance of getting some really good result tonight, I think, just based on how unforgiving this circuit can be. Like you've mentioned with the curbs, for example, like I think the one thing we were talking about earlier before the stream even started, I'll see if we can find anyone. Ollie G was probably the closest man to it, but coming into this corner here, this right-hander, we saw so many people, didn't we, go wide here and hit the wall on the hairpin because of that. So it's going to be something to keep an eye out for.
Yeah, you go a little bit wide. The grass is literally on the wall. So you touch the grass a little bit with your rear tires, you get a little bit of slippage, and your nose is straight into that wall, T-bone right in. And that can ruin your entire race right there. Exactly. And it's just one single mistake in the many different areas of this track where you can just clip a little bit, and then your back end is throwing you into a wall somewhere.
Absolutely. In the meantime, thank you, A&G Dens, for the subscribe. I know exactly who that is, Mr. Denzel Clarkson. Welcome to you, good sir. It's nice to see you. Hope things are good in your world, my friend. But yeah, going back to we talked a little bit about the pit stop phase, all this kind of stuff, and like I say, the potential for incidents or whatever that might be. Of course, because we have got that tire and fuel stop, it does add that element of strategy into the equation. Does mean that there's potential for people to maybe kind of do something slightly different. I understand it's a 40-minute pit window, so that'll be from 20 minutes in, 20 minutes. No, sorry, it'll be from 10 minutes in to 10 minutes to go. So you can't pit in the first or the last 10 minutes. If you're in that position, Chris, what are you doing? Are you pitting pretty much on the half an hour bubble, or are you going to pit maybe a little bit earlier as soon as the pit window opens? Are you going to extend the stint? Like, what are you thinking? Because 60 minutes isn't necessarily enough time to need a separate. I mean, I know they have to change tires, but you could maybe not have to worry too much and maybe just absolutely bolt it at the end on a fresh set of rubber, do you think?
You know, I'm absolutely terrible when it comes to strategy. I think I've mentioned that on a past stream before. So I'd probably just sit on that 30-minute mark and just have equal stints on either side of the pit stop, to be honest with you. I always make the worst decisions when it comes to changing things up. So typically what I'll do is I'll just keep it the same so that I get that muscle memory in, and I just put in the laps. So splitting it right down the middle would be my personal strategy. Now, there is something to be said about waiting till the last moment when you can pit and then having a nice fresh set of rubber underneath you. But the way that I drive typically, I kind of find this groove where it's almost like your mind shuts off once you've gotten all your brake points down.
Yeah.
And you just kind of roll around. I don't know.
Roll around. What an appropriate way to take it.
That's what I would be hoping for, is just to hit that muscle memory, that consistency zone.
Yeah.
Where I just can knock out the laps, be super tight on all of my brake points, all of my turn-ins, and just finish the race with as little incidents as possible. And hopefully capitalize on someone else who maybe is pushing too hard, or, you know, doesn't like the lights flashing in their mirrors, because sometimes I'll do that depending on who's in front.
Love to see it. Ollie Gill there coming through to round out the top 10. Carlo Durazio, last man on track to cross the line. In fact, there's one more, but I don't think he's going to improve. Carlo puts himself 12th on the grid. Last man to cross the line will be Nick Karayanis. However, he is not going to improve because he's currently 3.5 tenths down. So as it stands, it will be Miles Dixon on the front row of the grid, leading the way on the formation lap ahead of Karalisha Gullis. We'll run through a proper grid walk in just a second. Interestingly, I've just noticed, so obviously for those of you who know ACC, you'll know there's a little chat in the sims, you're going around it. I have just noticed that Miles is, shall I say, maybe not too happy with the car, which I feel is very amusing considering where he is on the grid.
Yeah, see, normally if I was in pole position, I'd probably not complain about the car. I'd be like, well, whatever I'm feeling obviously is just not mattering because I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
But maybe
You'd
he
think
knows
that,
a little
wouldn't
bit
you?
more.
You'd think
Yeah.
that, but clearly not. Right, let's go. Let's jump in. Let's go through the grid and let's have a look and see what we're looking at in terms of the grid for this one. This one's a lot easier for me to talk through because there's only 20 drivers, so I don't need to have one list on one screen and one on the other, which is much more helpful for me. As we said before, Miles Dixon will be on pole position. It's an all-Pulse SimSport front row with Carolus Yergulis in the Porsche alongside him. It's an all-Ferrari second row with Matt Damon and Ivo van Collenberg on the second row of the grid. It's then Peter Phillips and Mark Raddenbury, a much improved sixth position for him, really pulling all the stops out in that Lamborghini in this change car for this final couple of rounds. That's Gaz Gazulina and Mark Neutelings, 7th and 8th on the grid, with Thomas van der Struijs and Ollie Giel, rounding out the top 10. It's an all EOS 6th row of the grid with Andrea De Perna and Carlo D'Orazio on that one respectively. Mike Richards and Alessandro Di Candia in 14th and 15th, 13th and 14th, that's the one we're looking for. Nick Kalianis and Steve Derrick in 15th and 16th, with Colin Dunn, Robert Besant on the penultimate row of the grid, and then Martin de Groot and Nadir Balozzo rounding out the grid for this one. Only 20 cars, Chris. We've talked about this a couple of times already, of course, but I think we can sit with I'd probably say more than a little bit of confidence, because that qualifying session, although you and I tended to ramble as we tend to typically do during that session and didn't really pay a huge amount of attention to what was actually changing, it was quite close in the end in those results.
Yeah, the top 9 were all separated by a total of 1.5 seconds. And like I was saying earlier, on a track like this, on a duration of 60 minutes, I don't think you're out of the running even up to that point. Just consistency is going to play the biggest part in this race, realistically. I think everyone's got a pretty decent car at this point. There's no outliers that, really stick out to me that are going to be the slow ones. Like sometimes we would quote that the BMWs just have higher straight line speed. I think it was Monza back when we were talking about that. But this should be a close race. Consistency. I'm going to repeat that a lot in this one.
Couldn't put it better myself. 30 seconds until things get underway and we jump on for the formation lap. I'm looking at the server, Chris. Sun for the next 30 minutes. So no sign of rain, because we had rain coming in the last lap of Mazzano a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? So whether we'll see a repeat of that, it seems unlikely, which is very much a shame. However, you never know. We've seen stranger things. I did say to you before the broadcast, didn't I, that it was so on the kind of weather generator app that you can use to kind of see what potentially might happen. It's not the way we generate the weather, but it's what it looks like. It was a third chance of each different scenario. So a third would be all dry, a third all wet, and a third mixed conditions. So we'll have to wait and see. But anyway, let's hop into the grid. Now, what I'm going to do, Chris, I'm going to drop you in this. You know that I'm going to do this already, so I'm not really dropping you into it. But I'm going to bring in a certain somebody into the broadcast channel. Hopefully he can hear us now. Mark Raddenbury in the car for this evening. Chris, I'm going to let you have a nice little chat with Pos Per Boss Man. Take it away.
Yeah, the self-proclaimed Pos Per Boss Man.
Hey,
I guess the biggest question I have for you is, why did you switch cars? You went from the BMW, and why did you pick this instead of like the Porsche? Because we know the Porsche is actually pretty darn quick right now.
I knew this was coming, and I don't have an answer. BMW in the latest update, the M6, it's still a great car. I still love it. It's still my babe. But around here, I was about 2-3 seconds slower than I was with the Lambo.
That makes sense here.
I did try the Porsche, I did try the Ferrari, but I was a lot more confident behind the wheel of the Lambo. And plus, screaming V10, come on!
See, that makes sense that you were struggling a little bit in the M6, because the M6 is a boat. It's a big car, and this track specifically has very thin, not a lot of runoff. It's just, it feels very compact. It'll almost feel like you're on a go-kart track in that M6. So I could definitely see why you switched to the Lambo. Now, What do you think's going to happen, since you are a little bit of the admin view of the overall? How do you think this race is going to go with only 20 drivers on the grid coming out of last week, which you might say was a disaster in some areas?
Let's call it chaotic. Less cars should be, a bit more spread out. However, if you look at the qualifying times, as we were just doing in our chat, there's some tight packs.
I think
Real tight.
This track specifically, just because, like we were saying, it is thin, there's not a lot of runoff, it's going to create battles that normally wouldn't be there on some of the bigger tracks, some of the, like a Monza or Imola or something like that. So
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
overall, I think it's going to benefit you guys as drivers to have only 20 people on the track, just so you're not hitting that back marker traffic as often.
Yeah, and having a pit window as well of tyres and fuel should really play for strategy. I've worked my strategy out. I'm happy with it.
So speaking of strategy, you've worked
Not
yours
telling you.
out. Do you want to tell?
Not
anyone?
telling.
I
Not
think
telling, 'cause we're near the green.
I was going to say, I think we should let you go, Mark. We'll wish you luck, mate.
Let me
Have a good wanted
concentrate.
evening, and we'll catch you later on. Sorry, I thought I'd cut in there and remove him from the channel, because otherwise you're going to start hearing him talking about how the race is going, and that seems like a very messy idea indeed. But as Mark mentioned, we're about to go green any second now. So Miles Dixon, there we go. We're green light here at Zandvoort. Miles Dixon leads the way. Karol Szogulisek gets a great start off the line. But
Porsche, just like we thought, is pushing out, but it looked like he had to lift a little bit because he was nervous going into that first corner there in that lift. Look at what that did to him. His positioning is all off now.
put him right back into the mix of things with Matt Damon right on the cusp of that, trying to make that move as they go through the first couple of corners. Van Kollenberg, big incident at the start there. Van Kollenberg manages to spin and keep himself going. Mark Raddenberry caught him on that one. That's a very bent-looking Lamborghini, so not the start he would have wanted. Gaz
See, it
Gasolina.
would have been perfect if we kept him in the chat. I'd be talking to him, right?
Can you imagine? I don't think we'd want to keep him in the chat, given what has just happened there. I can imagine some curse words are being muttered as it stands. Fortunately, though, the top three get out of there with no issues off the start. It's been a little bit of a change further down the grid. There's been a couple of losses in terms of that, mainly for the likes of Peter Phillips, Mark Raddenberry, and Rob Besant, all losing some positions off the start there. Interestingly, Chris, Gaz Gasolina, you can see at the back end of the grid at the moment. He will, I think, pop up to sort of P18 in a minute. He actually didn't make the start, so he started from the pit lane. So it worked out well for him because he was 7th on the grid. So he's pretty much managed to avoid all form of incident by doing that.
Yeah, that 7th is right around where the incident really kind of came to a head. So the good thing for Mark, at least, is that this is a 60-minute race. So even with that damage, it's gonna slow him down, obviously. But he can get into the pits early and then just kind of, once again, consistent throughout the remainder of the race. And I think he can make up some slots.
Let's have a look back to what happened at the start of this one. This is Ivo Van Kollenberg going through the second corner. This is exactly... No, it's not. Sorry, I was about to say it's exactly what happened that we were talking about in the practice session, but it wasn't in the end. It was actually getting a tap there from Peter Phillips, it looks like. Let's see from Mark Raddenberry's point of view. In fact, this is contact with someone else. This is contact with Rob Besant. Oh, Rob goes very wide there.
Ooh.
I mean, that was very difficult for Mr. Raddenberry to avoid. I don't think it would have had I don't think it would have had a huge amount of impact on him. Let's have a look at some other incident here as well. So just going through the corner. This is Rob Besant coming together with, I believe, Nick Karayanis. I think Nick, Nick breaks to avoid Mark in, who's coming very slowly out of that hairpin, and as a result does give a little bit of a nudge, or gets a bit of a nudge rather, from the car behind him in the end. So interesting. Look, I wouldn't necessarily say that was a particularly messy start. So I don't know whether you think the same, but it was all caused by that one very small tap from Peter Phillips. And Van Kollenberg, despite the fact he was the one who got the tap and was essentially spun a 360 round, didn't actually end up that badly impacted by it.
No, it worked out. And, the track, we'll say it again, super thin. An incident happens, it's gonna collect some people. Unfortunately, it just happened to collect Prosper Bossman. But again, 60 minutes, plenty of time. Get that stuff repaired, get back into the zone of consistency. You're gonna pit and then everyone else in front of you is going to need to pit, so you're going to make up some slots. And I think as long as you keep your focus, don't worry about what has happened, and only worry about what is going to happen. I think it'll be okay.
Exactly. He's just coming out now, so he's going to come out in a bit of clear air. He's going to have a couple of cars around him in terms of those on the lead lap, so he's going to have to be careful for those. But the benefit Mark will have is that he will be quicker than some of these drivers. Like, he'll be quicker than Bellozzo ahead of him. He'll probably stick with the pace of Gasolina, who's directly behind him on track, who's trying a move. Oh, it's very close between the two of them. That was very spicy, dude. But you know what I mean? Like, he's in a... I get that being a lap down is never in a never good position to be in anyway, but he's probably come out of the right space on the track because he's got enough of a space to really kind of let that car loose and ultimately deliver on that 2-second lap pace delta that he has over himself in the M6. So he's still got a chance. You never know.
Yeah, I think it'll ultimately be okay. Of course, it's not the exact way you would want to start a race, but again, it'll be fine. The interesting thing about these cars is that, you know, from our views up here in the booth and from the little flying drones that we get to employ during these races, it looks like a mistake on the driver's part in the instance of like a tap or a missed braking point and running into the back of someone. But what we don't remember is that when you're behind someone in these big fat poopy GT3 cars, you can't see around it. You can't see anything happening past the car right in front of you. So a lot of these turn-ins where I forget who it was that was braking to try to avoid Mark, and then the guy behind him actually tapped him in the back. There was no way for that guy to avoid it because all that guy in the back could see was literally the rear end giant GT3 car in front of him.
You're absolutely right, and that's why when you were talking about that, I put the replay back on from the rear wing of Ivo van Collenberg, so you could see. Obviously, that's not going to give a true representation as to what Peter Phillips could see, but you can kind of see where the position might have happened because, for all intents and purposes, Peter had the opportunity to really kind of get around the outside there. It's just unfortunate that it looked to me like Ivo van Collenberg has maybe just overcorrected a little bit. He's doing exactly what we talked about people we saw doing in practice, where they've gone wide through that right-hander, they're overcorrecting and they're losing against the wall anyway. The difference is that Van Collenberg overcorrected, he saved it, but as a result turned himself into Peter Phillips. There was really very little that Peter could have done, to be quite frank.
Yeah. It was a line that was perfectly fine. I don't think there's any problems there, and we're doing that stewarding thing again, where we take the incidents and we steward them and say, but we're not stewards, so we don't know. But,
yeah, we should.
I think normal racing incident there. I don't think there was much that could be done to avoid that, especially, you know, it's a tight race in the beginning laps like that. You're gonna be close. You're gonna be inches off of the next person's bumper. So just the smallest adjustment that you're not expecting is going to get you into a little bit of trouble.
That's a big impact on it, exactly. Looking at Steve Derrick at the moment, just made a lovely move and a very good defence to it, you have to be said, on Mike Richards to hold on to 11th place in the race at the moment. I think he got the move done going into Bocht 9. I can only assume that Bocht in Dutch is turn because all of the track map I'm looking at says something Bocht. So I'm assuming that is turn. I mean, Mark Neutens will probably confirm. He is the resident Dutchman, the resident clog wearer of the grid. But of course, he's driving at the moment, so I can't ask him if that's correct. But I might check in with him afterwards. But what I was going to say is that I didn't see the move that Steve made, but what I liked is the fact that he was quite aggressive in his defence. I don't know whether you caught it as well, but going down that back straight and into that little kind of right-left chicane towards the back end of the lap, he came across quite forcefully, but did it at the right time. He did the one movement, which I thought was a really good, clean, fair defence. But it was quite aggressive enough to say to Mike Richards, like, don't even think about it. Like, it's a good little balance.
You know, there's something, I don't know why, but I enjoy watching a great defense more so than a great attack. I don't know why. And I think it's probably because most of the time I'm put in the defensive mode, so it's the one that resonates with me as a driver the most. So there's something just about those people, like, we'll take Fernando Alonso as an example. Like, those people who can defend with the best of them, it's just magic to watch. You're like, look at the positioning, look at the turn-ins, look at the exits. It's all perfect, and it's just fabulous to watch.
Oh, goodness me. Oh, my word, Ollie just lost it.
The cosmic cat goes into the wall.
Do you know what? I could see that coming. he was so close behind the back of Van der Stroys going on to the final corner because Van der Stroys, as he lights up the rear tyres trying to spin it around, luckily doesn't get involved in any instance of anyone else, which is good for him. But I was going to say, he was so close behind the back of that car a minute ago. You can see it here.
It looked like he was pushing him. It literally did.
He
like,
basically
There's
was.
no gap.
He's lost it. I mean, there's very little he could have done, which is very unfortunate. But if we look at it from, let's go to the rear wing of Van der Stroy. I feel like I'm doing a lot of replays from the rear wing perspective of Thomas Van der Stroy today, but he goes wide coming out of the corner on the gravel.
Look at
And you can see there, he's pushing him through.
Oh, little tap, okay. We got a tap.
A little tap, a little bit of understeer, and fortunately for Thomas, Carlo D'Orazio nearly. Goodness me, that is as close as you'd like. That shows you how different you can take the lines through those couple of corners, but he pushed him through.
He was sitting still in front of that Beamer. Like,
yeah, that was so close. Luckily,
you see him. He was flashing his lights and everything because he's like, "I had that line. Like, I had that."
It's such a tough one to do. So I've actually been in that position before, and I've made contact with someone doing that exact move, who I will not hasten to add, took revenge in the most ridiculous of ways possible by actually driving me off the road and ruining my chance of that championship, which I'm still not over.
I can tell.
Exactly the same thing happened, and I said obviously there's only so much you can do in something like this when you're not in a voice chat with someone or whatever it might be. You can't just go in and apologise to them. So I did exactly what Carlo nearly did there. Went down the inside, thought the door was open. Guy turns in, we make a bit of contact, spin him round. I thought I'll wait for him. That didn't make a difference in the ultimate grand scheme of things, but it is one of those. There's quite a few corners here. One they've just been through being a good example, where because of maybe the camber on the track, or maybe just the way that the track flows, you can take different lines through. Just gotta hope that the other person knows you're doing that.
Yeah, it's really hard to tell how fast someone is going in these simulators rear view, because for me, typically, I will turn down the field of view a ton so that people look closer than they actually are, rather than being the opposite where it's a very wide field of view and they look farther away. Because I'd rather be defending when I don't need to necessarily defend super hard, rather than make the mistake of not defending hard enough because I think they're far away. So I will very typically turn down the field of view to my rear view, like a 75-degree view. Just so that I see people a little closer. I also do have the benefit that I race in VR, so I have both side mirrors and the rear view mirror.
Yeah.
So that probably does help a lot, because I can just look at the side mirrors for when they're next to me, rather than only relying on that field of view of the rear view. But I don't like the feeling of how far are they away from me? They look like a little speck, and then all of a sudden they're on my mirror.
Objects in the mirror may appear closer than they actually are, or whatever their phrase is. I'm watching Carlos Yogulis at the moment. Of course, he's under pressure from Matt Damon, and this is a battle for second on the grid. I mean, Miles Dixon has absolutely disappeared up the road, but I think it's partly because, although Yogulis is holding on to the position, he's not exactly driving. Sorry, when I say he's not driving the cleanest race, I don't mean he's doing anything wrong. I just mean he looks like he's under a lot of pressure, doesn't he? He's making mistakes. You saw him, I don't know if you saw, going through the first corner at Tarzan Bocht. He went over the curb, went wide then, nearly gave Matt the chance to cut the inside. Oh, he loses the back end as well. This is what I mean.
I was just going to say, I think it's the Porsche fighting him on this track. We were mentioning how it looked like he was a little slip-slidey when he got the pole position anyways on the qualifying. And it just seems like there's something going on with maybe his anti-roll bars, or something that's just throwing off that back end just a little bit, that's making him hesitate, because he's a fast driver. So coming out of these corners with a little bit of fear because you think the rear end's just going to all of a sudden be facing the opposite direction, I'll toy with you real bad.
100% it will. It is definitely one of those tracks where you need confidence, isn't it? Because 95% of this lap, you are basically just chucking the car around. Yes, there's a lot of heavy braking zones, there's some slower corners and things like that, but you're almost on the limit for the majority of it. As again, he goes so slidey through there.
It's got to be the car fighting him, because these corners give you a little bit of a false sense of security as well, because they're all cambered pretty well. a lot of them dip in the apex and then come out, so you feel like you should have loads of grip coming out of the corner, but I guess maybe his foot's just a little heavier than his rear end.
Very interesting
it's
indeed.
really struggling for him.
One thing I am enjoying though is by going into this this interior cam, hearing the sound of that Porsche, it just doesn't miss. Like, it just sounds great.
ACC's in-car audio is some of the best out there. Now, as I mentioned, I race in VR, and literally there are times where my brain just shuts off and I feel like in the car. It's so fabulous. Just the environment that they put you in is so good. Oh, saved it. Look at that. Okay.
Oh my God, goes! Oh my goodness, this is all getting a little bit messy. I mean, to be fair, I don't know. We'll go back and see that in a second once it's going to calm down a little bit. But I don't think there was any contact from Colin behind there to instigate that slide. It just looked to me like, we'll see it from here. Looked to me as he went through there. Yeah, he puts his foot down and he just loses the back end a little bit. That's when Colin catches him. So there's no kind of nothing rude from the Lamborghini car.
The spin wasn't caused by the contact. The contact was a result of the spin, for sure. That was because, you know, he hits the brakes, gets a little love tap on the back end saying, hey, I'm here, and then ends up saving it. That was pretty interesting that you were able to save that, but it's probably because of the camber on the corner, because the rear end spun out towards the camber, so it just had so much grip, it just
leveled out again,
going all the way around.
What this has done, though, and I'm very much here for this, is this has generated a 6-car train from Mike Richards, the man on your screen at the moment, all the way back to Ollie Geel. Of course, he is the one who was actually battling for 6th place, but then had that coming together, coming onto the start-finish straight with Thomas van der Stroy. So this is generating what I have really been looking forward to, and this is one of those things that Zandvoort does generate. Like, don't get me wrong, Zandvoort is not, or is never going to be considered the utopia for overtaking maneuvers, but it does generate a lot of really good tension, doesn't it? Because you can have cars follow so closely like they are now.
Yeah, it's not
any
exactly
little mistake.
Monaco.
Yeah, it's like any little mistake for Mike Richards now. Invariably, he's down to, I mean, Bellozzo's only 2 seconds off this. He's down to 16th, 10th. So he's got to be on the ragged edge, keeping that pace going, but also can't do it. Speaking of which, Nick Karayanis has then gone a little bit wide. We'll see whether there's a coming together. I've got a record contact between him and Gaz. Says he just got a little bit of a nudge. He has, a little bit of a nudge there going through.
Just a little bit of a different breaking point than each other. Yeah.
But I can see there Gaz is... Oh, interesting. I'm not sure how to play this, because Gaz Gasolini is clearly slowed down there, isn't he? As a mark of apology, respect, like, I'll let you back through. Nick's then flashed him. I'm guessing as if to be like, look, it's fine. Maybe he was going to say, maybe, look, you were quicker than me anyway. That's what I don't know, but interesting discussion between the two of them. You can call it a discussion.
The flashing of the lights, Morse code, is harder to decipher than the tone of a text message. Let's be honest. You never know if they're angry at you and flashing, or if they're like, no, just go ahead and go, and they're flash. A flashing light just looks like a flashing light, and depending on the situation, you're like, I have no idea what that means.
Absolutely. What is he talking about?
What? I didn't do anything wrong. And he's saying, like, sorry, or, whatever, maybe.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's like when someone does that to you and then you end up, like, if I flash someone, like, when I'm driving on the road anyway, I might be flashing them because I'm saying thank you, or I might be saying, like, be careful what you're doing, or whatever it might be. And 99% of the time, for some reason, I'll do it, and I will get someone come back at me, and they'll probably flip the bird at me, and they'll think, I'll be like, I'm just telling you, your door's open a little bit. Like,
you're like, how did you not know I was being nice with the flashing of the lights? Come on.
Is this not a universal message of just kindness? It clearly isn't. As we can see there, the pit window has now opened. It's a 25-minute pit window, which is different. I was expected to be a 25-minute pit window, but that does mean that you can go in now at any point in the next 25 or 24 and a half minutes now and change tyres and fuel, something that Karolis Jurgulis has decided to do very, very early indeed. 19 or pretty much 18 minutes into the race, he serves his pit stop. Now, this is an interesting one, Chris, because this is going to be, at least at the top end of the grid, this is going to be our control variable. Let's go back to old school science. he's the one we're going to be kind of looking towards and seeing, like, right, where are people going to come out to in respect of him?
Right. I think he had to take that pit stop early because there were so many just loose tail ends going on for his car. I bet his tires are just destroyed at this point. So many just little slides and little things that'll burn up your tires. And I wonder how much the tire model update has actually changed that. I was just about to say raced ACC since the update. You know, when you work in sim racing, I guess you don't get to sim race as often. But yeah, I noticed that you also have not been racing recently. So I'm curious how the new tire model stuff is actually affecting these drivers, because I actually have no idea.
It's a very valid point. And I think that's, I mean, you could, like you say, you can clearly tell that he was struggling. The back end was going all over the place. He was struggling to keep any real sort of pace, as opposed to his teammate Miles Dixon, and he's now down in P16, only because Derek and Karianis have both pit as well, so they're serving their pit stops. Now the interesting thing for Nick, I can see him, he's that 193 car in the pit lane at the moment. He's going to come out behind the 668 machine of Ivar van Kollenberg, so he's going to be a lap down already. That does pose some issue, because obviously when you're a lap down, you do of course have to move out of the way. You don't have to massively slow down. We're not talking like F1 style raw blue flags here, but you do have to slow down a little bit, and that will impact his pace out the rest of it. So it's a good thing to maybe get the pit stop out of the way and give yourself some clear air, but he will lose a couple of seconds, you would expect, having to yield to specifically these guys on track at the moment, when they will catch up to him in a couple of laps time.
Yeah, totally agreed there. You know, watching Phillips with this Porsche, I'm noticing there's a couple of slides. It does seem like he's tamed it a little bit better than who are we talking? Jurgelis. But I think the Porsche here is just a little bit of a lively rear end. It seems like, I wonder if it's setup based, tire based. I'm not really sure, but it does seem like it's a little harder to control than some of these other cars.
I've definitely I'm with you. I've noticed he's lost. I wouldn't say he's lost it, but the back end's like stepped out a couple of times on power. Like especially going through this corner here, you can just see. Doesn't do it on this occasion, but I think on the last lap, just stepped out a little bit. So it's certainly something to keep an eye out for. And again, perfectly good reason for why people might want to pit a little bit earlier and get those tyres changed, get the fueling done, and get out there and get yourself some clear air and try and push forward a little bit where you can.
Yeah, yep, exactly. Yeah, this that affects your driving so much when the rear end is just a little lively on the X, because then you're always about half a second off of where you should be hitting the accelerator, just because you're scared of spinning. So that the negative impacts that has on your lap are just exponentially multiplying over every single lap that you do.
Yeah, because inevitably you will get more and more cautious as well, won't you? So it does have a massive impact. I totally agree. It's something to keep an eye out for. And like I say, I wouldn't necessarily say this is unique to Zandvoort. Driving a car like this is a confidence need. It requires a certain level of confidence for you to be able to put your all in. Like, you've obviously got electronics in the car to help with that sort of thing, like ABS, traction control, that sort of thing. But it still is off. The candy goes very wide there. Going out of the first quarter, it does show you that, yeah, you can lose so much time just by not kind of being fully on point and in sync, I suppose, with the car that you're driving.
Oh, look how close that is.
So close. It's another one where he's being pushed, like Alessandro Ducati's being pushed through the hairpin by Gaz Gasolina. Gaz has got some pace. He's ragged around that back straight.
I think he's got pace on him, and he's struggling to not hit the back of him. That's why we're seeing him just all over the road like that, just kind of avoiding contact, just making a little adjustments here and there that just look exaggerated because, you know, there it is.
Yeah, I was about to say,
okay.
Yeah, Alessandro. I don't know if that was planned or not, because if you noticed, Gasolina flashed his lights coming through master spot into that fast right-hander. And then DeCandia almost looked like he went deep on purpose and then flashed him back. So I don't know whether that was in the plan, whether it was just something that happened. He was just kind of maybe doing a very polite flashing. Who knows? We've just literally just discussed how we don't know whether it's a good or a bad flash. Who knows? But
You know, that it almost feels like that was a go by me because ultimately you're going to mess up my race because I'm paying too much attention to you and my mirrors
Yeah.
situation. Because there are times where someone's all over your back end and you're like, just go, just get by me so that I can
Yeah.
get back to my race again.
I've had that a few times, and I'll be honest, I've been the person who has been let through because I've been that close to looking like I'm going to take someone out. And there's no malice in it. It's just I forget the fact that people are going to, like, especially when you do something like this, like Yogulis will have a lot of this, I'm sure, as he goes through the race, assuming people don't pit before he gets to them. He's a lot quicker than a lot of these people on track, so he's going to have that same level of care and discretion because people are going to brake earlier than him.
Oh yeah, and that is something that happens when iRacing does a fabulous job of putting you with the similar skilled people that you should be with iRating and all that, right? So a lot of the time, if you have like a really bad race and then you get dropped into a lower iRating, you're mentally still expecting the drivers to drive like you do.
Yeah.
Because that's typically what your grids are like. They drive very similar, and their brake points are very similar, and their turn-ins are very similar. But when you get put into some of those lower, or like in this situation, when you're fighting with the back markers or the back end of the grid, you have to remember that they're not the same kind of driver you are. So you have to adjust your style a little bit. And I'm super guilty of just expecting everyone. I'm like, no, they're going to do the same thing that I would do.
Yeah.
Pretty much all the time. And then I make a mistake and tap the back bumper. I'm like, oh, right. They're, I'm passing.
Oh, yeah, you brake earlier than I do, of course.
Right.
I know what you mean. It's a tough balance to find, it really is.
It so is.
Now, fortunately for these guys, I was keeping an eye on it just before, so Van der Stroys has got Peter Phillips still within a second, so it's quite close. Carlo Durazzo has dropped off because he's actually gone into the pits, so he is serving his mandatory stop as we speak, as we actually near the halfway point. Amazingly, it's kind of flown by this first half an hour, first 25 minutes of this race. It's interesting because what I was going to say is the fact that Nick Karayanis, who is the man in front of Van der Stroys on track now in that white Ferrari, he was actually right behind Rob Besson, who was ahead of him on track. So it was a fight for position. So I was kind of hoping that Rob was going to stay on track and not pit, because I would have been really intrigued to see how Van der Stroys and Phillips would have made their way around them. You know what I mean? Because there would have been no reason for either of them to get out of the way, because they are having their own battle, really. Like, it's a difficult balance to find.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing when you have a blue flag, but you're in the middle of a fight. You're like, okay, but no, I don't want to lose this fight or get taken out of this fight just because I'm letting someone else by. It's difficult decisions.
You see it a lot in endurance racing, don't you? Like you'll find, like, more so, I guess, when you're the one who's doing the lapping. Like if you're the Van der Stroys or the Phillips in that scenario, you're kind of there thinking, probably the more Peter Phillips in this scenario because you're the one behind. You're kind of thinking, well, look, the guy ahead of me, he's going to get past that lap car. I'm not going to force my way through because I might lose time to him now, but then I will gain time back to him when I overtake them, and vice versa, all that sort of stuff. So there is that kind of swings and roundabouts that you have to take into account, as we see there. Peter Phillips and Ollie Giel both into the pits. Mike Richards has caused a yellow flag. We have a look back a few seconds to see what's happened here. Does he go deep into the first corner? He makes it through there. Oh, there goes the back end. Oh, that's a silly... Oh dear.
That didn't look...
Oh no, it's fine.
That didn't look as drastic as... Well, didn't there? I mean, unfortunately,
the wall tap was a little bit clumsy, dare I say. It was one of them, like, lost the back end, held it quite well to avoid himself kind of putting it into a proper spin, but it almost seemed like he just got an incessant amount of understeer and just kind of lazily drove into the wall.
Yeah, that was very weird coming out of that spin. One thing that you have to remember on these cambered turns like this is when your rear end does lose it, it's not going to lose it like it does on a flat turn. It's going to hit the grip and it's going to stop spinning. So recovery here is a lot easier than you probably expect it to be, like in that case there. But when he was trying to turn, it just seemed like you kind of needed to grip the wheel a little bit more,
exactly.
to be honest.
You can see here, three-way battle for P15 at the moment. Balozzo leading that battle as it stands. Karayanis has just got past Colin Dunn. Colin, actually, I don't know if you noticed it, but Colin went very heavy over the interior curb onto the start-finish straight, almost as a way of almost kind of avoiding Balozzo ahead of him. I think Colin has got a bit of pace over Nadir at the moment. As you see, Balozzo goes a little bit wide, coming out of Hugenholtz spot, as is the name. I'm going to just call them generic names now, I think, because I'm probably butchering the Dutch phonetic language. But you can see there's a little bit of damage on the front end of the car. There's probably a little bit more damage somewhere else as well. He's clearly lacking a little bit of pace. It's a tough one, isn't it? Because when you're the person trying to overtake that car, you're probably kind of sitting there thinking, oh, I hope he gets out of the way. Maybe he's going to let me through. But then you know that he's probably not going to, so then you have to kind of be a bit more cautious as a result. That then means that you're being slower and you're maybe being a bit clumsier. It's quite a difficult move to make in the end, isn't it? Like, it's not as easy as when you are just generally quicker than someone and they've got absolutely no problem in the car, because you can probably just go, right, I'll send it on the brakes and I'll be done. This feels a little bit different because that car just looks a little bit on edge and looks like it could potentially, I'm not saying he'll cause the accident, but might lose the car and have some sort of incident as a result of it.
Well, you make an interesting point there, but like, the track is thin, so it's hard to overtake. It's harder than a lot of other tracks. Plus, when you have the camber on those turns, like you said, you can take weird lines into some of these turns and ultimately benefit from them. But there's been quite a few spins and quite a few incidents. So let's say you've seen a lot of people spin. You've seen a lot of these incidents happen in front of you. That makes you gun shy. I mean, right here, there was a little bit of an alternate line there. Ultimately didn't yield anything. But, you know, when you have cambered turns, you can do some creative things in these passing. But Zando has a way about it where it's like, nah, we're going to have camber, but we're going to have thin lanes. The track is not going to be wide. So we're going to throw that variable in there. And I think that's where a lot of this shyness is coming from.
I think that makes sense. And interestingly, I hadn't noticed this before. I have just spotted it now. All of these cars on track as it stands, so all the way down to Mike Richards, who's actually just in the background. We might see him. I was about to say we might see him come out of that corner behind, but we didn't. They've all served their pit stop. So Balozzo is he's got no reason to move out of the way. Not that I'm suggesting he would move out of the way, you know what I mean? But he's well within his rights to defend this position.
Yeah, and if you have the rights to defend, always defend. What's the Senna quote of, if there's a gap and you don't go for it, you're no longer a racer?
Yeah,
kind
if you no longer go for a gap that doesn't exist or whatever. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's kind of the same thing where if you're allowed to defend and you don't, you're no longer a racer, right? Kind of just opposite.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like, there's certainly a lot of ways of looking at it, and ultimately, it's one of them. Like, one person who I know is very much of that belief is that Gazzolini coming out of the pit lane there, just to add an extra level of complexity to it as Balozzo goes a little bit wide. Gaz got a lot of damage on the front end of that Audi. Goodness me.
These cars are all over the place right now.
Oh, Nick's gone one more. This is terrifying to watch. I feel like I need the helicam just to keep an eye on what's going on here. How has Balozzo ended up with about a 1.5 second gap back to these guys now? Colin Dunn now gets the move done on Karayanis, does he? Karayanis is going to yield in the end.
Yeah,
it looked a little bit like, which was probably sensible. But that was an interesting couple of corners there. It was very difficult to unpack and but figure out what was going to happen.
Yeah, Gasolina coming out of the pits, getting in the mix is what ultimately got that gap to extend so much. But man, there were so many just switching sides of the road. Ooh, what happened here?
Don't know. I'm going to go back and see if we can. I'm assuming he's lost the car as he's gone through here. Oh, takes a big chunk of curb, and yeah, there you go. Offsets the car.
Right,
that felt like it. That felt like it was on the horizon, didn't it? Did look like he was going to lose the back end at some point.
It all started bad coming out of the pits for him, coming out into traffic like that, being kind of in the middle of that battle, and you're like, okay, do I move over here? Do I move? And then it throws off your rhythm completely. You're thinking about the mistakes that you just made, and then ultimately you make another mistake. Just welcome to sim racing.
Yeah, you overcompensate, don't you? I'm just looking back up to the top end of the grid. Miles Dixon has now pitted, so he's served his pit stop. He's come out quite a way. In fact, they've all ended up quite a way ahead. We've kind of not really touched the season map, but Carlos Georgulis, we talked about it earlier, didn't we? He was the one who we were going to kind of keep an eye out for, and then we've essentially failed to do so. but he's in 9th position despite the fact people around him have pit. So it's not really worked out very well for him doing that early pit stop.
No, not really. I mean, you kind of have to feel for him though, because he was struggling with the rear end of that car. So at some point you're like, okay, do I switch something up here? I have to do something. I can't just continually fight with this rear end of the car. And, you know, we haven't really followed him all that much since that pit stop. So we don't know if he's still struggling or not. So maybe that's coming into play where, you know, it's not flowing for him today.
Yeah, exactly. One couple of people who can't really be separated at the moment is these two on the track. So Van der Stroys and Peter Phillips still very much in the mix. In fact, Jogulis does now pit from 9th position. So wonder if he is struggling with something. He's got no discernible damage on the car from what I can see. So I'm not sure what would have caused that. And then we'll pan to our race leader as it stands. 25 and a half minutes left to call in this one as Mark Neutelings leads the way. I'm sure he won't mind me saying it's not often that he gets a chance to do this in a Pos per league race, so I'm sure, I know what Mark's like, he will make as much of this as he possibly can. He will be pitting, I have no doubt, as close to that pit window closing as possible, knowing what he's like. So we'll see whether that is the case, but he will he'll be enjoying this, I'm sure. I remember vividly back to one of the first races I actually commentated on in sim racing at all. He was actually in the Bentley, I believe it was, at Zandvoort. He was maybe out of reach to the top 10. It was a 40 car grid, so he's like well above like where you'd expect us to be. And I think it was partly because he'd not actually pitted, so similar sort of vibes. This one, pit window, pit when you want sort of thing. He frustrated so many people, and I mean so many people, because he wouldn't pit and he wouldn't let people go either. So I remember the Discord was a raft of just frustration at the end of the race, being like, why didn't that number 666 car let me through? And he was like, well, I don't need to.
I don't have to.
No,
Yeah,
it's not I'm not entitled to let you through, sort of thing. And I was like, and that's why I thought, like, I love this guy because he just doesn't care. Like, he'll do it. And don't get me wrong, like, he's a brilliant defensive driver as well. You talked about it earlier about how like defensive driving is arguably better to watch, and I totally agree. It's much more difficult to defend properly than it is to attack. He does such a good job of it, honestly. Like, I can't say there's many people better out there in sim racing from what I've seen.
Yeah, defending is just, it's magical to watch because, I don't know, I feel like I learn more from watching someone defend perfectly than I do watching someone make an amazing move. I'm like, yeah, okay, that was a move. But how much can I learn from this guy that's actually a brilliant defender?
I think it very much depends on the move as well. Like, I like the ones where maybe you teared up a couple of corners in advance. Maybe you have to get the switch back on someone because you've made them outbrake themselves. Like a little bit of mind games in there. The boring ones are when someone just sends it and just gets the move done. You're there like, oh, okay, right, well.
Yeah, normal.
Cool.
Sim racing move.
Yeah, exactly. You've basically you've waited to see when they break and they move out of your island, and then you've braked as you've seen that happen, so you know you're going to get the move done at the inside. You're either going to hit the apex or you're not. Like, there's no jeopardy in it. As you can see, support for Miles in the chat from Johnny Seville. As you can see, your man is doing very well indeed. Pulse Sim Sport winning this one at the moment. Your teammate Carol Shogulis, though, not having as good of a time as Mark Neutelings comes out very close.
That was
close.
close.
To that duo there, making it a trio. That's worked out really well for him, because that's put him very much on the outskirts of a top 4. You can see here. So this is, although it's not updated on the timing tower, this is a battle for P4. And then Adam Masalovic saying, go Mark, go, no pit stop. Well, he has pitted now, Adam, I'm afraid. But as you saw there, he's come out in a very good position, and that's Carlo Durazio. It's 1.4 seconds behind as well. We've been fortunate, haven't we, where we've actually been treated to some very close battling, despite the fact maybe I could say we were a little bit worried at the start of this that they were going to kind of split out a little bit. They've actually kept quite a lot of people very close together.
Yeah, it's I kind of expected this to happen just based on the track, because it is hard to pass here. It's a technical track, it's consistency based, and it just feels like it's delivering, because I honestly think if we had the 35 cars like we had... Oh no, there's that corner.
Oh no.
Got relatively scot-free. I mean, if you have to make a mistake there, I'm going to choose the way that he came out of it, just kissing the front and the back end just a
Yeah.
little bit on that corner. We saw a lot in practice where they'd hit that corner, spin out just enough to, face first into that white barrier. So I think he got away with one there. That's for sure.
He definitely did. As you can see there, Miles Dixon makes the move lap Nadia Belotza there. He almost did like was it NASCAR the back end of last year or maybe like last season where that guy rode the car around the wall to get into was it the playoffs or something? I can't remember the full ins and outs of it, but that's what it felt like.
I can't remember the driver name. It was like the last place to get into the final or something like that. He had to get fourth, so he just sent it around the barriers and actually got around. Of course, the car was chalked and done, but hey.
We got in, exactly. Yeah, you can fix the car afterwards. You can't get into it after the race is finished, can you? So it's a sense.
No, did you see some of the team chats? They're like, that guy pulled off a sim racing move.
All sim racers are looking at it. It's like the is it the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he's there sat on I think it's from Django Unchained, like he points at the camera, doesn't he? Like that's what we do. That is that kind of thing.
Like that he snaps and points like, oh.
Yeah, that's a sim racer move.
It was a brilliant move, but oh man, that they made rules against it now, of course, because
isn't that kind of what sim racing is all about though? Like, not sim racing, sorry, just racing as a whole. Like rules are put in place. There's always someone who will go against the rules, and what I guess it kind of frustrates me sometimes is when people will kick off and moan about the fact that so and so are exploiting the rules when all they're doing is finding a loophole, which is totally fair. Like if the rules
I don't
say
think
you
there's
can't do
anything
it,
wrong with it. I think it's like the responsibility of you as a team. Now, if it's straight up cheating, there's definitely a line there. But if I guess in this case, it's like he was still on the track. It's not like he. I mean, I'm gonna call it out. It's not like he was driving on the apron at Daytona. Like it's part of the track. It just happens to have a barrier there, and he just floored it. Okay.
I'm gutted you chose to make that reference because my next question to you was going to be, how does that compare to riding on the apron at Daytona? Because that to me is like that's the big thing, isn't it? It's not big in sim racing now. It was 4 months ago, but
yeah,
it is like at the time it was arguably the biggest kind of bending, if not complete disregard to the rules that you'll have seen in the sim racing circuit, really, isn't it? No pun intended.
I guess you can compare those two events very directly, but in my eyes, they are two separate things. For instance, the guy in NASCAR, he was on the track. The barrier kept him on the track. Why not, right? But at Daytona, the apron is explicitly said, do not drive on the apron. And they did. So there are two. No one ever said don't use the wall to get around the corner.
Exactly. It's part of it is essentially an extension of the track. So.
Yeah. All you do, you have to keep your car on the track. His car was on the track in NASCAR. Their car was not on the track in the sim racing event.
Exactly. I'm glad we agree. I think that's exactly what it is, though. You find loopholes in the rules, and then people exploit them, and you make a rule to combat someone who's making it to have an advantage. I totally get it. It's that's just the way it is. People exploit it, and then you'll put something in place. It's like the rear blown diffuser, or whatever it was in F1 when was it Brawn GP the ones who did it back in 2009. Like it's that kind of thing that people will find, they'll exploit, they'll make the most of it. If then it gives what is supposedly kind of interpreted as an unfair advantage, then you put the rule in place to stop it happening. Simple as that. Yeah,
and I guess there's one piece, and I'll try to make this the last piece that I talk about this specific event, but the apron at Daytona was exclusively mentioned in the driver's dream. That's enough to know, well, you knew you were doing something wrong. The guy in NASCAR's like, I just sent it down the wall. I don't care.
You have no idea how jealous I am, the fact that you can just do an American accent, because something like that, that kind of comment needs an American accent to go against it. But I will never ever do one, because it will be the rudest thing I'll ever do, and I will be disgracing myself in front of anyone who ever watches this, whatever nationality they are, because it will just be an awful impression.
I get a pass because I am American.
Exactly. You can put on. Funnily enough, so this is completely right. We'll get back to the racing in a second, but as you can see, there's not a huge amount going on at the moment. I used to work with an American guy, and he was out. Where he was Boston. I want to say he was from.
Okay.
So you can probably. He wasn't a very thick Boston accent. It wasn't like a Mark Wahlberg jokey Boston accent. It wasn't that sort of thing. But he could do so many different impressions. Like he could do a fantastic Texan accent. He could do a perfect Massachusetts Boston, Massachusetts one. He could do Florida. He'd do all sorts. Like New York, he could do the whole thing. And I remember we went out for like this team dinner. It was a big affair, like a big fancy posh nosh things. And we said to him, like, say a few different things, and he transitioned between them perfectly.
So amazing.
It was incredible.
I would love to be a voice actor and be able to do that kind of thing. Like if you ever see an interview with Seth MacFarlane from Family Guy, it's just amazing. Absolutely. I could watch videos of that for forever, like for days and days and days.
It is just seamless. Like it's incredible. I don't get how they do it. But there you go. We have lost someone. I've just noticed. We're down to 19. I'm trying to figure out who it is.
Just so it looks like Phillips is really starting to get a synergy with this Porsche. Either that, or he's backed off enough to the point where it's no longer giving him issues. And you got to wonder which one it is, because that's really the only two options you have. Is you that synergy and you find that magic TC setting where you're like, okay, now treating me appropriately, or you have to back off to the point where you're not as competitive as you'd like to be. I wonder which one it is. I mean, I say not as competitive, and he's in 5th place. It's not anything to be throwing a stick at. But
I think he's just finding his pace. Like he was within a tenth of his fastest lap on that last lap as they go into the first corner, and I thought there was going to be some contact there. It looked like one of them, I think, because Mark Neutlings went one way, Peter went the other. It looked like he was obviously defending from Neutlings, but then potentially going to make the move on Van der Stroy. So it was all getting a little bit spicy. But it does look like, I mean, Mark is pulling out the pace because he's actually done his personal best on the last lap, which is faster than either of the two guys in front of him. They're actually 8 tenths of a second quicker on that last lap, as we do lose another car. And I can definitely tell you that was Carolus Gullis who left on that one, because I did notice he was still in.
He was struggling with his Porsche. He couldn't tame that back end, and you know, at a certain point, do you cut your losses because you're so frustrated your race is already done? I'm not the type who doesn't like to finish a race, because I'll be thinking about that race for the next 2 weeks, going, I should have just stuck it out even though I was frustrated. Yeah. But at a certain point, if you are becoming a risk to the other drivers, do you make that determination where you go, I guess I don't know, it's a hard one.
It's a tough one. Nadir Balozzo, I believe, looking at the time attack, is the other driver who has sadly had to retire by the looks of it. So I think that's the two of them that are gone. So Balozzo and Yogo Studio have gone. It's all a big move for Molly Gill up the inside. Can he get the move done? It's going to shake back. It's going to be the inside of Steve Derrick, but he's not going to have the chance. Lovely move that was. He didn't broadcast it at all, did he? He literally just went, God, done, move done. Next.
That's one of those moments where you're going into a corner, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait, there's a car on my left. What?
How did that get there?
Where'd you come from? What's happening?
It was
a frustrating moment.
It was a brilliant move, though. You can't say fairer than that. Meanwhile, back up in the battle of P4, Van der Stroy is still holding on ahead of Peter Phillips. Mark Neutlings has dropped back a touch on the last lap. He lost a second to these guys on the last tour of the circuit. So he's peaks and troughs is Mark at the moment. We'll see whether he can actually get back up onto the back end of these. But look at these two. I mean, the difference is, I feel like that, because that Mercedes is so much heavier than the Porsche, I assume anyway. It looks like the Porsche is so much nimbler, or so much more nimble, say.
Yeah, it really does. And I don't know if that's just because one of them's defending, one of them's attacking. So the defenders obviously typically have the smoother line, for most cases, because the attacker has to go inside, then go outside, torture your mirrors a little bit, kind of weave in and out of your vision. So I don't know if it's that, or if the Porsche is just that much quicker and, just like you said, nimble around this course.
It does. It certainly feels a little bit more on edge. I think it's probably the best way you could explain the difference in kind of characteristics between the two cars. It certainly feels like the Porsche is a lot more, on the ragged edge, I would say, in terms of...
Well, I mean, we had Jurgelis retire because he couldn't tame the Porsche. Phillips was struggling at some point. It looks like he's kind of found his either traction control setting or his right foot has started to cooperate with what the Porsche wants. Who knows? But it definitely does feel like it's on that ragged edge, as you said.
Absolutely. You can see there, Neutlings is just on the back end of this battle. He's 0.8 of a second back as Peter Phillips goes a little bit wide there. There's some contact with the wall. That is exactly, we were about to say it, Chris, weren't you? That's exactly what we were talking about at the start of this one. We'll see it from the back end of the cockpit. Just goes a little bit sideways. So difficult. It's slightly different to what we were talking about before, wasn't it? Where he didn't actually go wide and then had to overcorrect. Lost the back end a smidge. It's interesting.
Yeah, and that's not surprising with the way the Porsche has been driving for both drivers who were in it. One who retired, unfortunately. It's just he did the right thing though. So if you were watching his hands, there it goes again. Now he's locked up on the front. So there we go. It's because now his tires took a little bit of a beating. His steering probably took a little bit of a on that first incident, and now it's just kind of in one of those modes where kind of over at this point. If now just hold your place.
He is fortunate. He has got a 27-second gap back to Ollie Gilles. So P7, barring any miraculous mistakes, he will hold on to P7 in the last 10 minutes or so. So he'll be fortunate there. One I'm keeping a very keen eye on, and as everyone else is, because they're watching it on the stream now as well, is the battle for P4 still. Because Thomas van der Stroys, I mean this in the least rude way possible. He doesn't look very... It's not that he's not very quick, he looks like he's very prone to a mistake. Like we saw him a second ago, of course, he was the one where he went wide, Ollie Gilles pushed him through the final corner and then lost the car as a result. He's done exactly the same thing just on this last lap where he's gone wide. He's nerfed that curb in the right-hander coming into this part of the circuit. He looks very kind of susceptible, I suppose is the word I would use.
I'd agree with that. And, Mark closed the gap really fast, so... He backed off a lot when Phillips was in between the two of them. I wonder if he saw that Phillips was struggling for control. So he's like, I'm just going to back off because it's only a matter of time before it. And now he's back in the fight again saying, okay, Phillips is out of the way. Now I can mount an attack here and just make this happen for myself and get that fourth place.
A very good point. Like you say, there's an argument, and Mark is definitely one of those people. Like he's very sensible when it comes to racing, where in the sense of, he won't push unless he absolutely needs to. And even then, I feel like he doesn't really push anyway. He's quite a calm driver. I mean, he'll probably come back to me after this and be like, I'm not calm at all. You've raced with me and I moan a lot. But like, as a driver, he's very calm. He doesn't go for that kind of really silly move. He doesn't do anything he shouldn't really do. Very collected, almost kind of sizes up what he needs to do. And most of the time... tends to make the move because other people make mistakes. Doesn't necessarily force the move.
He's very patient as well. Here it comes. I don't like the outside line on this one. It looks like he's going to back out and then try it again sometime. I had the pleasure of driving with Mark in the Bathurst 12-hour, and just through the conversations that I did have with him, he's a patient driver as well. He knows what he should be doing. There was a couple of incidents where he was a little hard on himself for making just small mistakes. I mean, it's Bathurst, that place will throw you into a wall faster than you can even realize that you've done. So I definitely can understand where you'd say he would think he's not a very patient driver, because when he does make a mistake, he lights himself up about it for sure.
Very much gets on his own back, I suppose you'd say. Very much the opposite to what he's doing now, because he's very much on the back of Thomas van der Stroys instead. He is almost pushing the 963 Mercedes around this circuit in the final 7 minutes of this race. It feels to me like the move is going to happen. It's a case of when, not if.
Yeah, it really does feel like that. It feels like he seems to have recognized a flaw in Phillips. When he was driving around, he backed off, waited for him to make the mistake, and now he's back in the fight again with the person who was in front of Phillips. So it seems like he's assessed the situation, and it definitely is going to be one of those, okay, it's coming. I'm just not going to let you know when.
I feel like he needs another repeat of what happened on the last lap, where Van der Stroys went wide coming out into the final corner, but then he just needs to get to the inside, because if this continues happening, all Van der Stroys is going to do is he will just cover the inside line, because as you rightly pointed out, Chris, it's very difficult to get around the outside in this first corner. There is that camber that can help, but in cars like this, it's so difficult to make the move.
Yeah, it's almost too long, and then the track thins so much right after it. You don't have a lot of extra room if you didn't complete it by the time the turn's over.
It is, yeah. It's a tough balance, and I think if he can force the mistake either somewhere else on track and get the move done, or he can get that inside line. Oh, I thought he was going to go for it there. Then that would have been very opportunistic from the Flying Dutchman to get that one done. We'll see. Like I say, I suppose there is an opportunity to do it somewhere else, but I mean, what have we got?
Last turn looked wide, but he kept it perfectly fine.
Yeah.
I don't know. It looks so odd coming. Like that Merc just looks like it's right on the cusp of spinning off of that corner.
It really does, yeah. Now, interestingly, we've got Martin de Groot just ahead of these two. Thomas van der Stroos goes a little bit deep there into the final couple of corners. Martin de Groot is ahead of these. See, just Ferrari in the just disappearing off the front of the screen. He is, for all intents and purposes, at least going by the livery, a teammate of Van der Stroos. So, will we see any underhand tactics? Now, funnily enough, I cast my mind back to a couple of seasons ago at in a Pospelli where that did happen, and it was very quickly led to a change in the rules. But no, sensibly, Martin de Groot does actually get out of the way. I'm glad to see that, because that would have been unfair if that had have had an impact on the proceedings.
Very, very good. I'm sure he wanted to do something. He's like, oh, my teammate needs some help. What can I do here? But yeah, you just kind of have to go, well, good luck, buddy. Have fun.
He actually, to be fair to him, he got caught at the right time, didn't he? Because he could have, as you saw, he just went wide around the first corner, completely different line, stayed out of the way. It was relatively straightforward, which is always a good thing. Unlike, if we cast our minds back to Suzuka, where Rob Besson, of course, didn't let through the leader into the final chicane, let them both through on the exit, and that meant inevitably a change of leadership. Annoyingly, I can't remember who won that race, but I do vividly remember that exact point.
Now, that was a rough one for sure at Suzuka. That was a gifted exchange right there.
Sorry to the Besson family, including Rob, for mentioning that again on stream, because I feel like we've done that every race since that happened. This is looking like
one of the more exciting things that's happened in the last.
It is, to be fair. This is spicing up though. This is certainly becoming a little bit of an interesting one here, because Mark Neutelings is putting all of the moves and ideas on the back of that Mercedes of Van der Stroos. He is very much trying to get that move done in any way, shape or form. He made Van der Stroos there, Chris, go a little bit deep into that hairpin. Didn't mesh onto it. Now this is interesting. A bit of weaving going on. Can Mark get to the inside? He's going to go to the outside again. He is alongside though.
That covering the inside right there.
To the outside. Is he going to get it done? It's going to be a little bit of contact. Oh, goes a little bit wide there. A little bit of an elbow check from Van der Stroos there. Just pushed him wide. Oh, but Van der Stroos goes wide anyway and gives the position. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Oh, heartbreak. Heartbreak for the Mercedes driver in the Orcapos Racing Machine. Loses fourth place. Mark Neutelings finally gets his victim, and they succumb to the wrath of the Flying Dutchman. Gets the move done.
I could feel what it was like in Mark's driver's seat. Where he's like, oh, that dude, he side-checked me, he turned into me, what the heck? And then he's like, oh, never mind. Oh, cool.
That is brilliant. I tell you what, he's done a fantastic job to get back up into to get into the top four anyway. He's only gained 3 positions, which is quite surprising. Like, I feel like normally when you see a car get so far up, it feels like they should have got loads more when they're at that kind of level, when you don't normally see them up there. But yeah, only the 4 positions that he's gained. The biggest winner overall is actually the man behind him, Carlo D'Orazio. He's made 6 positions. But yeah,
not gonna
just
lie, right
pressured
there
him away.
You're like, oh, he only gained 4 positions. That gave me a real crew chief vibe, where like you have a great race in your mind, and he's like, never mind.
Yeah.
At the end,
Oh yeah, we'll just go home and prepare for the next one or whatever he normally says. Yeah, very frustrated at him. Adam Asalovic is showing his support for Mark in the chat as well, which is very good to see. It was a very good move. Again, he luckily for me, he actually proved my point in the sense of he didn't really make the move. He just kind of forced the error.
yeah, brilliant driving there, because with the pass on Phillips, he saw that there was a little bit of struggle happening. He backed off, waited until the struggle, came to a head, and there was a mistake. And then he kind of did the exact same thing twice and just waited until something went wrong, capitalized on it when he needed to, got a little bit scrappy in the corner there with that side check, but ultimately got the position.
Actually,
4th place he goes.
did what he needed to do. As we come on to the final lap of this one, this is your man on screen, your leader of this race, and has been the leader ever since the start. Took pole position, has got the fastest lap, and will potentially, providing keeps this one clean, take the race win in this one. Miles Dixon has been a class above, despite the fact he was rather less than affectionate of his Ferrari 296 before the race began. He has led every lap of the race bar 2. He has got the fastest lap, and he's going to take the win in this one along with the pole position. There's a name for it. Oh my word! Oh my god!
Oh no!
Oh my goodness me!
What is
Heart in
happening?
mouth moment. Oh my word! I can't believe that.
Almost cursed him.
I don't think I've ever seen Miles Dixon make a mistake, and then he almost made a mistake that lost him the lead. Goodness me!
He's like, oh, you don't want to take my complaints about this car serious? I'll just crash it then.
Perfect race. Hold my
Wow.
beer. Like that was incredible. Wow. I mean, other than that, it looks like he's driven the perfect race, and I suppose the best thing about it for him is, weirdly, is the fact that we've not seen him at all.
Yeah, so I was just gonna mention this. When you have that perfect race, it's almost like we're not F1 broadcasting where we don't show the battles, right? So he didn't get any camera time just because he had such a brilliant race, and it was just perfectly executed, well timed, and just consistent throughout. We
Did
did
what he
talk about
needed to do.
how many times did we mention consistency. He had it, and therefore he got no camera time.
Exactly. And there you go. Then,
Congratulations
yeah.
there. That was a fabulous race.
Fantastic race. Miles Dixon is your winner here at Zandvoort for round 5 of the Positive Perception GT Championship. Matt Damon, takes a respectable P2 in the end, after making the move on Carolus Jurgulis in the end to get that position off him. Ivo van Kollenberg will eventually come through to take the 3rd place in the final step on the podium, and importantly for him, an extension of his lead in the silver class, because he's taking the class victory this evening. Mark Neutelings will come through 4th in the race, a few seconds back of Carlo D'Orazio, a couple of seconds back from him. Everyone else, Van der Stroys all the way down to Gaz Gasolina, who did not finish this one, and the 2 drivers who left before the end all finished, Chris, more than a lap down, which shows you how imperious that drive has been from Miles Dixon. The fact he has managed to lap all but 4 cars is incredible.
Yeah, that's a race to keep track of. Save that video on demand. Pocket for one of those days you need a little bit of a pick me up from another race, because that was brilliant. That
was an imperious drive, I think is the best way to put it. Like, no one really was anywhere near him. Like,
it's weird though, because as a driver you're like, well, that was boring. I mean, it was great, but that was boring.
Yeah, exactly. It is tough, and it's one of those where I imagine he was probably not struggling, because that's not what Miles does typically, but he's probably like having to kind of put quite a lot of effort in to not like make a mistake or anything. And obviously we saw that on the final lap. He nearly did make a mistake that potentially could have ruined his race, but luckily for him it didn't.
He took the rallycross line through that section.
It was an interesting move. It's not one I've seen before. I don't think it's one that we'll see again. Ultimately, fortunately for him, it didn't impact his race in the end of it. But I mean, other than that, to be fair, I think I'm sure you'll agree. I was coming into this one, I said to you before, I wasn't necessarily hugely confident about how this was going to go, because ultimately Zandvoort is not the kind of track that lends itself to overtaking a huge amount, but we've actually, personally, I think we've seen a really good race.
No, I think the fact that we only started with 20 drivers on the grid ended up being better for this broadcast altogether. I think if we had double that, where we were, closer to 40, like we were in the past couple of races, it would have gotten very hectic, and we would have had a much different outcome than what we had. We saw good racecraft, good passing, good moves, generally speaking. Nothing really that's going to stand out and be talked about for weeks necessarily, which is kind of a good thing. It sounds, strange, but it's a good thing.
Well, I think the positive is that I think the stewards are going to be a lot less busy than they were after the last round. I mean, I never actually looked at the what words am I looking for? I never looked at the why can't I use words? The stewards notices after the last round. I'm actually going to have a quick look at them now, just to see how many there were. So there was there was 10. Oh god, no, it keeps going. 12 protests in the end.
Yeah.
In the last round, and there was a lap one review by the stewards as a whole anyway, which had its own 6 incidents. So
yeah, this race was nice and clean. I mean, even the few incidents that we did have, heavy kind of stuff, so a little bit of a spin out here and there, but pretty low drama race, fabulous racecraft in there, and just overall, Zando actually delivered with its 20 racer grid, and it felt nice. It was well done, and that'll bring us just to the final round on this 2 weeks away from now. Where are we going?
We are heading in. Well, I was going to say to your hometown. We're definitely not headed to your hometown, but we're heading as close to your hometown as we have done all season, because we are wrapping up the season at the iconic. Yes, I've said the word iconic because I couldn't think of what else to say. Watkins Glen circuit for the final round of the season in a couple of weeks' time. So that'll be 2 weeks from today, which will be, my dates have failed me, the 1st of June. So we enter the final month of the first half of the year, which is a very complicated way of saying we're entering. I know it sounds horrible, doesn't it, when you put it that way? Yeah, Watkins Glen will be the finale of the season. It'll be a 60 minutes lights to flag race, so no pit stops or anything like we had this evening. It's the classic dusk till night race that we always have to wrap up our seasons in the Positive Perception GT Championship. So very much looking forward to that one, Chris. I'll see you there.
I will be there for
Lovely
sure.
Stuff, and I'm sure we'll see all of you who have watched this evening as well there on top of that. Thank you to those of you who watched the stream live. Thank you to those of you who are watching the stream back, and if you're still watching it now, then I love you all. That's your little nugget of fun if you've watched this far. I won't say that anywhere else in the stream, so you have to watch right to the end if you want to hear that bit. But thank you very much for watching, as always. Whether it's live or you watch it back on the VOD afterwards, we will see you in a couple of weeks, as we mentioned, for the finale of the championship at Watkins Glen. But between now and then, it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from Chris as well. Thank you very much for watching, as always, and we'll see you guys again very, very soon. Have a lovely evening. Goodbye.